All right.
Yeah.
So, let's go over 19 and see what we can find out here. All right, so Saul spoke to Jonathan his son and to all of his servants that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted greatly in David. All right, so it seems to me that at this point Saul is not totally aware of the friendship between Jonathan and David. Otherwise, he would not go to Jonathan and ask him to kill David.
You wouldn't think so.
It appears that the covenant that David and Jonathan have made and the strong friendship and all of that, Saul is living in this little dream world and, in this sort of state of madness, and for some reason he doesn't seem to be aware of it. So he is now...
Where was David living at that time? Didn't he leave? Where did he leave?
Well, David will come and go at the palace and back at different times. And so it's just interesting that he couldn't kill him with a spear, and so he decides that he'll have his servants or his son or someone else. So at this point he has everybody in the kingdom looking for David. So Jonathan, turkey.
Go.
So Jonathan told David, saying,
He just looks at me.
"My father Saul seeks to kill you. Now, therefore, please be on your guard until morning and stay in a secret place and hide."
Wow.
So he comes. Are they out there?
Yeah, the big one, and
He's
Knock on-
dumping huge amounts of seed out.
Just knock on the door and we'll tell him. Sorry, camera, that you have to be part of all of this, but we have turkeys. No, just knock.
Maybe I
I
should
knocked
just
it.
knock.
I'll pan over and
Please.
show the turkey.
Yeah.
No, that works.
This is why.
Yeah, I just don't want him knocking down my bird feeders.
funny.
Sorry, camera. All right. So Jonathan told David, saying, "My father Saul seeks to kill you. Be on guard until morning and stay in a secret place and hide, or stay out of danger, David." Interesting, isn't it? Telling that he goes to David right away with a plan and tells him. So we're going to see some interesting things about the loyalty of Jonathan that we're going to evaluate as we go along. But we do know that his loyalty to David is strong.
And it sounds like he's keeping it a secret.
He at this point, it does sound like that, doesn't it? That his father's not really aware of it. So he says, "And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak with my father about you. Then what I observe, I will tell you." So he's kind of coming up with this little plan, and he says, "Go on out to this secret place." They seem to know where it is because he's bringing his father the next day, and we're going to be out there, and while you're hiding somewhere behind a bush or a tree or some area, I'm going to bring my father out there, and we're going to have a conversation about you, and I'm going to let you know exactly what he's talking about. Well, it seems interesting to me because, if Saul is telling Jonathan and the servants to kill David, I'm not 100% sure exactly what Jonathan thinks he's going to do at this point, but he seems to have a plan, and it's going to work out. So it's just kind of interesting
And it's also interesting that Jonathan's loyalty is more so to David than his own father.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Although Jonathan's gonna go like this at different times. It's really interesting, but yes, in this case, his loyalty is to David, isn't it? And above and beyond anything that his father says, which is unusual for the crown prince of the kingdom to go against the father, and yet the father's mad.
Does anyone know that Samuel has anointed David?
It appears to me that Jonathan knows. I believe Jonathan knows. Now, the scripture doesn't just come flat out and tell us what everyone knows and what they know, how they know about all of this. But I believe, according to some of the things that Jonathan is saying and the giving of the robe and all of that, that Jonathan is aware that God is going to be with David in a very special way. More so than just a military leader. But the scripture doesn't clearly tell us what everybody knows at every time. So we sort of have to surmise from some of the conversations that go back and forth. So as we move along, we'll see a little bit more of that. So in verse 4 it says, "Then Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said, 'Let not the king sin against his servant, against David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his works have been very good toward you.'" So he gives him two reasons. Why are you against him? First of all, David really has done nothing wrong. That's a big in the face of Saul. David has done nothing wrong. And not only that, but the things that he has done, they've made you look really good. Because when your top general goes out and has military success all over, who really gets the credit for that? The king, right? And so everything that David is doing is to the benefit of Saul. And so there's no reasonable reason that Saul should have anything against David. And Jonathan is pointing that out to his dad. In verse 5 he says, "For he took his life in his hands and killed the Philistine." Which Philistine?
The German.
Goliath.
Okay, the Goliath. "And the Lord brought about a great deliverance for all Israel." Here we see a little bit about the heart of Jonathan, right? Because he's giving credit where credit's due. Who brought about that battle between Goliath and David?
Saul.
Saul.
Should have been out there.
Well, right. I didn't phrase that right. Who brought about the deliverance in that battle? The success came from God. And I like the fact that Jonathan points that out. He doesn't give the credit either to Saul or to David or anyone else. He says the Lord brought about a great deliverance. Remember chapter 17? The title of that was "The Battle is the Lord's." And so it's really a cool reminder here that Jonathan, he has that firmly imprinted. It just tells us a little bit more about Jonathan's heart.
Well, and earlier Saul says to David, "The Lord is with you."
Yes, he does. Absolutely. So he says, "And the Lord brought about a great deliverance for all Israel. You saw it, Saul, and you rejoiced because it benefited you greatly. Why then will you sin against innocent blood to kill David without a cause?" So the other word for kills without a cause and innocent blood would be what?
Murder.
Murder. He's telling him, you are planning on murdering David. I'm wondering if Saul had never put it in that terms, because when you're a king and you have supreme control of everything and you can come and go and do as you please, take whatever woman you want, take whatever life you want, take whatever goods you want as a king, I'm wondering if there's a little hardening of the heart that occurs where you don't even see that anymore as adultery or murder or any of that. And David, we'll see some of that as we move along with David. But it does tell you that sometimes with power comes what? This great blindness to the sin that you have. The more power that you have, the more people that do your will, it almost feels like it becomes easier and easier to excuse whatever sin you want. Boy, do we not see that even today?
Right.
In every way, in our communities, in our churches, in our government, in whatever, anywhere where there's great power, this temptation to go out and do things with it. The enemy uses that in a way where there's a blindness almost.
Yeah, self-deception.
Yes, you almost see yourself as above that, don't you?
Definitely.
And I think in Saul's case, he's in his state of madness too. He definitely is not seeing that. So Jonathan is being quite brave in pointing out to him that this is murder. So look at 6. This is so interesting. So Saul heeded the voice of Jonathan, and Saul swore, "As the Lord lives, he," who's the he? David shall not be killed. Oh dear Saul of great rash oaths that you make.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again.
promise.
Promises that you make that you break very quickly. So here he just flat out says, "As the Lord lives." He uses that as his swearing, as his oath making. David shall live. So Jonathan called David, then Jonathan called David, and Jonathan told him all of these things. So Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as in times past. So painting that story, what happened? David evidently comes back to reconciliation, back to the castle, back to the palace with Saul, and as in times past. Well, what did it look like? What was their relationship in times past?
The harvest.
He was the harpist. He was the right-hand man. He was someone that Saul trusted. He was someone that Saul called into his presence for various times. He was able to soothe Saul and to speak wisdom into his life. And so the words that Jonathan spoke must have had some sort of an impact. There's a little place in Saul's heart where that reasoning was able to get through to him. Now, a new time frame. There was a war again, and David went out and fought with the Philistines. Well, remember that in times past, Saul also made David the general of the military. And so David went out and was very successful and wise. Once again, he's done the same, evidently put David in charge of the military. So David goes out, he fights with the Philistines and struck them with a mighty blow, and they fled from him. Should that be a good thing for Saul?
Yes.
Absolutely, right? It's his enemies, and David is accomplishing that. Now look at 9. Now the distressing spirit from the Lord came upon Saul as he sat in his house with a spear in his hand. Picture that. He sits around with a spear in his hand, just kind of waiting. And it seems to be when that distressing spirit comes upon him that he gets all churned up in whatever ways, and that he wants that weapon close to him. David has felt this before. David knows what can happen before. And David was playing music with his hand. So once again, David is there soothing or attempting to soothe that distressing spirit. Then Saul sought to pin David to the wall with a spear. This is the 4th time in our stories
Is it Bible?
that this has happened. It would appear that way, wouldn't it? But he slipped away from Saul's presence, and he drove the spear into the wall. Here's another example. This is the 4th attempt with a spear to try and pin him to the wall. And once again, David slips away.
No
So-
wonder he was out practicing.
So David fled and escaped that night. We find out that he's going to head to Gibeah. That's where he's going. And Saul also sent messengers to David's house to watch him and kill him in the morning. Right, stop right there for just a minute. What has he just told Jonathan?
He
That
wouldn't.
he wouldn't be killed.
As what? As the
Lord
lives. David will not die. We're now 3 verses down, and it says he sent messengers to watch him and kill him. How quickly he turned from that.
But the oath was kept.
Huh?
But the oath was kept. He was never killed.
Well, that's true, but it wasn't for lack of trying, was it? He says, and Michal, David's wife, told him, saying, if you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed. How do you suppose Michal knew about this plan?
First of all,
She has people, doesn't she?
I think he wasn't quiet about what he said. He was probably yelling at the top of his lungs.
He's being very direct, isn't he? He's letting enough people know what's going on. The word comes back to Michal. She's from that group of people. I'm sure she has loyal friends in there who...
Well, and Jonathan.
She's a daughter.
She's the daughter of Saul, but I'm just saying, Saul, how would she have heard about this if her and David...
A lot of those people.
Her and David are living elsewhere. Could be. I mean, there are lots of ways that she would have inroads into the palace intrigue of what's going on.
So she knows how crazy her father is.
Yes.
Is she risking her life with her next action?
Obviously, I believe obviously she is. Let's go on, and that's a great question. So he says, if you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed. So Michal let David down through a window, and he went and he fled and he escaped. Now, I wanted to, in your packet, you'll see that I've included Psalms 59. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I am going to read just a couple of little verses. Look at the very beginning of that. It says, to the chief musician, set to Do Not Destroy. Must have been a song. It says, a Michtam of David when Saul sent men and they watched the house in order to kill him. So this psalm is written while this event that we're discussing is occurring. Saul is now writing this song. David, I'm sorry, thank you. It says, deliver me from my enemies, O my God. Defend me from those who rise up against me. Deliver me from the workers of iniquity and save me from bloodthirsty men. For look, they wait for my life. The mighty gather against me, not for my transgression or my sin, O Lord. They run and prepare themselves through no fault of mine. Awake to help me, and behold, you therefore, O Lord God of hosts, the God of Israel, awake to punish all the nations. Do not be merciful to any wicked transgressors, Selah. And it goes on and talks about it, and it says, in the evening, look in verse 14, at the evening they return, they growl like a dog. They go all about the city. They wander up and down for food. They howl if they're not satisfied. So this is how he's feeling as he knows these messengers are surrounding him and looking for him. But the last verse, 16, but I will sing of your power. Yes, I will sing aloud of your mercy in the morning, for you have been my defense and refuge in the day of trouble. To you, O my strength, I will sing praises, for God is my defense, my God of mercy. So that gives us a little window. I encourage you to read during the week the entire thing and sort of read it slowly and put yourself in David's shoes as he's writing this out, how he's feeling about this. And throughout being frightened, not knowing what's going to happen, not sure of how this is all going to turn out, who does he turn to? The Lord. That's his hope. That's his defense. All of this is showing us the heart of David. And so Michal lets him down. He goes through the window. He escapes. And Michal comes up with this amazing little plan. She takes an image. In the Hebrew, the word is the teraphim. It's the teraphim. It's the little household idols. They don't have to be little. They can be many different sizes. But it's the idols that they would have used. Keep in mind, if you will, that the Jewish people did not always make these teraphim to worship other gods. Sometimes they made teraphim as a representation of the God of Israel. Did God want that?
No.
Did God want that?
No.
No. That was never correct, no matter if you were using it as an idol or as a teraphim, because just like the Ark of the Covenant was too small to contain the Lord, so too would anything that they could make with their hands. It was silly and useless for them to do that, and so God never wanted that to occur. Mm-hmm. It appears that it was a common practice of this time. We saw it in Ezekiel. There were teraphim oftentimes used by the Jewish people there, and so this was something. Abraham had, Rachel had them in her saddle
So
when they found her.
Thought that they also would be for property inheritance.
I don't know how that would work. How explain that?
They don't know, but because Abraham was believing in God and didn't believe in idols, they are surmising that also this is my family will. This belongs to our family and guarantees that this property is ours, so that his wife is trying to say we could go back to Ura and reclaim our property.
Okay. I don't know anything about that teaching. I haven't ever heard it, so I can't add anything to that. Mm-hmm. I do know that it was a common thing, and it was not something that God wanted for them to have. But Michal appears to have had it. Remember, she's the daughter of Saul.
I can see how, Jane, what you're saying, because they believe that the gods were specific to one area, and Terra meaning land, right? Mm-hmm. So it would be the god representing that piece of land.
But Bible dictionaries will put that in.
Interesting. That's
So
really interesting.
what is the word you're using?
It's teraphim. Well, in our it says image here in our reading, but so it would be some sort of a little, like a statue sort of item that they would have used, and they could be very small. Some of them were like pocket size that you could carry around like a good luck charm. Some of them, in this case, it appears this one was fairly large.
Let's spell it, if you will, please.
Terefim. And so she takes this image and she lays it in the bed, and she puts a cover of goat's hair for his head and covers it with clothes. We can learn from that David had a good set of hair because if she's using that to represent David, that's pretty bushy and a lot of hair. And so she's obviously making something that makes it look like David is lying in the bed. So when Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, "Oh, he's sick." Is that true?
No.
But it was a necessary lie, wasn't it? It was something that she needed to do at this time. So Saul sent the messengers back to see David, saying, "Bring him up to me in the bed that I may kill him." So now Saul's saying, "I'll do it. Bring him to me." And when the messengers had come in, there was the image in the bed with a cover of goat's hair for its head. So they recognize they've been duped, they've been tricked. And Saul said to Michal, "Why have you deceived me like this and sent my enemy away so that he has escaped?" And Michal answered Saul and said, "Well, he said to me, 'Let me go. Why should I kill you?'" Is that true?
No.
No.
Again, if someone asked, I think maybe it was you that asked, is she putting her life at risk? I believe that this shows that yes, she was. And
That's crazy.
had she said, "Well, I helped him get away because I knew you were coming to kill him," he very well could have taken the spear and pinned her to the wall, right?
He would have.
And she knew this and knew that she needed to come up with this excuse for doing what it was that she did. So David fled and escaped and went to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and stayed in Naoth. So Naoth is, it's in Ramah, and there are two schools of thought on it. One, that it is a section that is used in Ramah, more than likely where the school of prophets would have met. So a little section set aside in Ramah. It also has some root word in residence, so it could have been a specific residence that had a name in Ramah. It's not terribly important. It's just that it's not another town. It's a place in Ramah that they go to. Why Ramah? Where is Samuel from?
That's where he's from.
Where was his mom and daddy from?
Yeah, that's where his mom.
Yeah, so we've talked about that, and in fact I included, again, I think this is even a duplicate, but I want to just keep showing you, this is Saul's land, and you can find, again, look on some of these as we go through here and familiarize yourself with it.
I
It
don't see
I don't see it on there
You don't
either.
see Ramah on here.
Where was it?
It would have been not too far away from the Jerusalem area, somewhere in there. So it's not actually on here. But this is the kingdom of Saul. This is the area that Saul would have had. All right, so you could probably look at one of your back maps and find it and put a place where Ramah is on there. But around the Jerusalem, Bethlehem area. All right, so he goes to Samuel because why? Why would he go to Samuel?
Samuel was his. Let's see. Samuel.
Well,
Here's the
Samuel.
religious leader.
His answers. And he needs answers.
Yeah.
So Samuel is the prophet.
He's the one that came.
He's the one who
Dedicated him.
anointed
Yeah,
him,
anointed, that's the
who
word.
knows the background of David, of where this is going, of what's going on. He also anointed Saul. Samuel did. And so he's tied intricately into this, woven into this whole story, and he also knows what God has planned to go. And so David makes a very wise decision, doesn't he? Remember back in the time when Saul was going to go meet with Samuel, why was Saul going to go meet with him? To find out where the donkeys were.
Yeah.
We talked about that,
Yeah.
and how he
Chapter
used
10.
him as kind of a little, genie in a bottle thing. David, on the other hand, knows that Samuel is the religious tie that would help him, give him good, wise counsel. So he makes a wise decision in going to that. So he's going to go and he's going to stay in Naoth. Just a point of interest here is that for the next 10 years after this time frame when he goes to Samuel in Ramah, David is going to be wandering. So we have 10 years where David is going to be going to various different places, but he's never going to have firm roots after this event takes place. Now it was told to Saul, saying, "Take note, David is in Naoth in Ramah." So Saul sent messengers to take David. And when they saw the group of prophets prophesying, and Samuel standing as leader over them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. So let's paint this picture. So Samuel, if this is the area where the school of prophets, and when they talk about the sons of prophets, this is what we've talked about before. This group of people, the students of Samuel that he's training and teaching, and so they're prophesying. Now they're prophesying what? What does prophesying mean?
Can be
Telling, teaching spiritual truths, right? And so or spiritual words that the Lord, has given to them to do. So this would be something that they would commonly discuss and talk about. And so they began to prophesy. But these messengers that Saul has sent to take David, they begin to do what? Prophesy.
So that's why they called him a prophet.
Well, it's interesting to me that the Spirit of the Lord comes upon them and they begin to prophesy. Again, two schools of thought on that. One, that God is just using them simply to, just as he did with Balaam, and it was, against their own, they wanted to do evil and God chose to do good with it. That's one of the schools of thought, that God uses it for that. The second school of thought on this is a judgment. And God puts, because of what they are attempting to do, which is kill David, that God is causing them to speak words, sort of crazy words, to go out there and sort of be foolish among the people, because speaking from the Lord he could use that and cause the same type of distressing spirit that fell on Saul. So the two schools of thought of either God is using them.
School of thought too, that these men knew David and knew his integrity and didn't want to kill him, but had to follow orders.
Well, and that's true. The only reason that I would say that doesn't fly here is because of what happens next with Saul. And so it's sort of the same reason that the two are going to do the same act. So if you believe that the Spirit of the Lord is coming upon these messengers and they're prophesying against their will sort of good things, then the same is going to happen when Saul does it. But if you believe that the Lord is using them to humble them, basically, in a way, then the same
sends on them.
The fact that they happen right one after the other probably leads us to believe that it's the same thing, first with the messengers and then with Saul. It would make sense probably that it was that way. And so that's what these messengers then begin to do. And then where are we at? 22.
21, 22.
So Saul was told, he sent messengers and they prophesied, and then Saul sent messengers again the third time and they prophesied. So it doesn't matter who he sends, God is going to use it that way. So then he went to Ramah and came to the great well that is at Sehu, and he asked and said, "Where are Samuel and David?" And someone said, "Indeed, they are at Naioth in Ramah." So he went there to Naioth in Ramah, and the Spirit of God was upon him also. So it's the same explanation that happened to the messengers, and he went on and prophesied until he came to Naioth in Ramah. And he also stripped off his clothes and prophesied before Samuel in like manner, and lay down naked all that day and all that night. So he's taking it to the next level. He's taking off his clothes and he's laying down in front of Samuel, and he's beginning to act the same way that these messengers that came began to act.
Naked as well?
It doesn't say that they were
What
naked.
does that word also?
Also.
Does that mean he also added on this behavior, or does it also like the men?
Yeah.
That's an ambiguous.
Where are we at? Where the
Third
also?
word
in
24
24
is very ambiguous.
And he also stripped off his clothes. So I'm reading that as, and he came to Naioth and Ramah, and he also stripped off his clothes at that time. Did the prophets strip off their?
It could also be the prophets like them.
It could be, but
it's
wouldn't you
either.
think that would be something that they would make clear in the previous verses?
Yeah,
That it would be recorded.
And
Yeah.
the previous
That
verse
also,
talks
yeah.
about.
If it's not
his-
said, I wouldn't assume it.
But the previous verses
It
talk
is
about
also
his
in the
behavior.
original even.
To
He would
they
And
add words
prophesied
like
and telling
crazy.
him to name Naoth is talking about him.
Yes.
And so he also, it would be in addition to what he was doing in the previous verse, I would think.
And he came, and
Could
so
be.
so he's whether or not the prophets, that's an iffy thing. But we know Saul did it. We know
I
that
would
Saul.
rather imagine that he's the only one.
Yes. Makes it a prettier
Now let's talk about why God would use that this particular thing. It's a very humbling thing, isn't it? He's the king. And so when he strips off himself naked, he's taking off royal robes and whatever else that he's wearing, and I can imagine that it's probably the finest garments, whatever it is. And he maybe even some armor because he's coming to do battle with David. And so whatever it is that he's wearing, he takes all of that off and strips and lays himself down for a full day and a full night. He humbles himself. Two reasons. Not only is God putting Saul in this awkward position in front of his servants and in front of the people who see him. Everyone is watching this. Can you imagine that's going on about that? But while he is doing this, David now has an opportunity to flee.
Right.
Because he's here when Saul comes. And while all this is happening on, there's a bunch of commotion happening on over here, and David is going to flee. So once again, we go back to what we talked about earlier. You are immortal until God decides that it is time for you to die. In this case, he's providing a distraction, an interesting one, but we need to, as interesting as the details always are, and they are so interesting that we get involved in, don't lose sight of the main purpose that God is using all of this to bring Saul to his knees because he promised he would. And he's using this to elevate David because he promised he would. And he's using this to provide provision and safety for David because he promised that he would. All of this is God's plans and purposes for the people that are involved. And we sometimes get so wrapped up in the details, we forget this is about God. And the control that he has over these men as they bumble and fumble their way through so many different aspects of what happens. And we're going to see a lot of this as we continue on,
Yeah.
that God does that. Any questions on that?
This seemed like kind of an answer to David's searching for God's will at this point, because he'd gone to Samuel, and then this happens,
Yes.
showing him God saying, "I'm in control. I got
Exactly.
it going. You know, don't even worry about it. Yeah, I got your back."
Exactly.
You know.
And when you read the psalm that David wrote during all of this time, it also helps you understand that David knows that. He knows that no matter how his enemies come after him, no matter how they're going to hunt him down like a dog and search for him, that his praise goes out to God because God is his strength, and he
shows you his heart.
he's very, very clear
The
about
heart he
that.
has for God.
Yep, absolutely. And so once again, Saul's plans for David are thwarted, and David is now going to spend, as I mentioned before, the next 10 years going out. Now remember, God takes away the dynasty from Saul earlier on, and then he flat out tells him, you're not going to be king. There's going to be someone else who's going to come up and take your place. What a lot of people neglect to understand, and it's important for us to remember, is God's timing is very different than our timing, and that is not going to happen for some 20 years after he gives those things. In God's eyes, that's a blink of an eye, right? But for if you're waiting to be king, 20 years is a long time to wait, right? And you can also think about Saul getting kind of maybe comfortable in the idea that as the years go by and nothing happens and he remains king, that he becomes more and more confident, perhaps, that he's got this handled. So yeah. All right, that's 19. We can turn the camera off now, Francie.